My name is Valerie Raya. I'm currently a third year at UCSB. And so my first question to you would be, how did you overcome the challenges of being like shy and nervous in these spaces where these professionals are attending, like in conferences? Because I do know that you attended a lot of them. So what kind of like helped you to overcome that challenge? And then also to add on to that question, I is there any specific like language that you would use? Like, would you use professional language in these areas, or how did you like communicate to them?
So when it comes to conferences specifically, I think a lot of it has to do with mindset and going into the conference with focusing on maybe taking in and listening a bit more than you're speaking. Because I know a lot of people can be very focused on, wait, how do I present myself? What do I say? When, certainly look polished and professional, that'll be helpful as you enter a professional space. And I highly recommend, you're in college now. If you start going to conferences and networking now, it's great to get started as soon as you can to immerse yourself in those environments. And if you're feeling shy and maybe out of place, normalize it. Make it something that is not something that you never do, where maybe the first time you do anything might feel a little strange because you just haven't done it before. But one thing that I like to recommend is, if you feel like you want to have more of a purpose at a conference or at a networking event, is to volunteer. So get in touch and ask, hey, do you need help at this event? And maybe you're checking people in. I think that can be, and then you're seeing how the event works. So you're eliminating a lot of the uncertainty of, wait, like, what is this event? What's going on? And to have a friendly face in the room who is the organizer is nice.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, so let's see. I'd love to make sure that I'm answering your question. So when it comes to feeling kind of shy, really, it's putting the focus on other people and, how can you help them feel comfortable? Because sometimes when we're self-conscious, then that actually can keep you from connecting with other people. So it's in a mindset capacity, changing the focus to being externally focused and considering getting involved behind the scenes. There are a lot of professional organizations that maybe you can get involved in, that maybe the sponsor of the event. And how does that sound to maybe be a part of something? And you can't be a part of every single event you go to, but at least if you're a part of one thing, then that's a place to begin.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for answering that question. I also wanted to touch base on how so I want to go into social work, right? And a lot of people, like, when you tell them that, it's kind of like, oh, but you won't make money, or like it's hard to make money in that field, or you're gonna end up in debt getting your master's and then not being able to like pay it off. So I know you have a book, right? You did a book, you just came out with a book. So I just wanted to ask you, how do you overcome those challenges as well, or these sort of barriers that people create in your goals or in your life? How do you deal with that, and how do you overcome that challenge?
Yeah. So let's even go back to you mentioning that you want to be a social worker. So I'm curious, what makes you want to be a social worker? What is your why behind that?
So I saw the Netflix series of Gabriel Fernandez, and it just broke my heart the way that these social workers literally felt him, like the entire system felt him. And so I just felt really inspired, and I want to be like a social worker that cares about their job and is not just doing it for like a paycheck. And that's honestly what truly just inspires me, just even though it's something negative, but it inspires me to want to put in the work and make a difference in the system. So that's what truly just inspires me to become a social worker. And right now I'm still not sure what category I want to go into, because there's a lot of social workers, and that's currently what I'm trying to work on as well. I just had a meeting with the director of social work in Santa Barbara, at the University of Santa Barbara. So I'm just trying to get my foot in and see can I shadow you, can I see what they do in their day-to-day life basis. But yeah, that's why I want to be a social worker, to overall try to change the system and just do better.
Yeah. Okay. So that's powerful that,
Thank you.
sometimes there can be things in your direct experience, or maybe, you saw a documentary and you felt called. You're like, wait a second, there are some issues or some holes in these systems. And and you felt a call to wait, I could be involved in that. You could see yourself in that position making different choices. And I think where some people can kind of get wobbly when it comes to their purpose is they have an experience like what you had. And then maybe you're excited. So you talk with a lot of people about it, maybe indiscriminately. You talk with everyone about it and then invite all of these opinions. It can be useful to take a look at not necessarily the monetary value of what the people you're talking to are making, but if you're concerned about meaningful work, and not to say you can't have both. I think it's possible to give back and balance. Maybe there's an entrepreneurial endeavor or a side job. You can create your career in a creative way, or maybe it doesn't look like the standard social worker job that you've seen, right? So there's where there's a will, there's a way. But if you feel called to it, you may even find out that it's not for you, but you may
Mhm.
get that confirmation that yes, this is for me. So first of all, being discerning around who you share your dreams with, especially if you're asking for advice. Maybe you want to, speak with people who you really admire. And
Mhm.
if you know that you don't want to be talked out of it, it's kind of like before you make the leap into, let's say, for in this example, a social work program, maybe you want to be sure that you're already in it. And maybe you have 1 year down where you're a bit more embodied in it. And if it is for you, because right now it probably seems a little less tangible. You have this idea and this inspiration,
Mhm.
and you're getting ready to turn it into something, a potential avenue for your life. And I
Yeah.
like to think of nothing as being set in stone. And
Mhm.
anyone who's alive knows that things happen that you would not expect.
Yeah.
So to to embark upon this, not necessarily with the mindset of, okay, well, now since I'm having this thought and I'm enrolling in this program, this is my life path forever. I mean, it could be, but to allow more curiosity. And
Mhm.
and then once you commit yourself, just knowing that life can take you in unexpected places, and maybe the expression of your gifts and how you'll contribute, it won't necessarily always have the exact title that you think it's
Mhm.
going to have. But it could as well. So really it's about maintaining that curiosity and moving forward. And I think you're doing a great thing by connecting with people in the space, because another thing I like to recommend when you're seeking going down a certain career path
Mhm.
is get to know the people that are already doing that job, and ask yourself, or even just observing them at an event, maybe there's a social worker meetup, because one-on-one is one thing, but
Yeah.
do they seem happy? What is their level of work-life balance? And in any career there's an element of aspects that you really love, and things that maybe you get to decide, like, can you embrace that? Can you tolerate that? Or is it something that just doesn't work with the type of like life that you'd like to live? So how does that sound when it comes to being just even slightly more discerning around who you're having that conversation with, and being
Mhm.
really observant around other people's experiences as you begin to gain your own experience?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for answering that question. It definitely did answer it, and that's true. I feel like you do have to, just put yourself in areas and spaces where they're doing the same thing that you want to do, or that you're thinking of going towards that career path. And then also just it kind of correlates with that question, but just like what are some strategies that help you like deal with fear, or like I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I have anxiety, but it's kind of like nervousness, kind of going back to that question that I just asked, but more so like fear, because I feel like I I have all of these plans that, oh, after I graduate, I want to get my master's, and it's like I've always wanted, since I was little, I always wanted to go to LA, for what I just, when I was younger, and I know LA can be like ugly and nice too. But anyway, so my goal was always to go to LA. But as I'm older, I just feel like those dreams kind of start to like, I guess, fade away, because I'm like, okay, well, realistically, like I feel like I just set my goals. Like I had these big dreams, and then now that I'm like starting to accomplish them, it's like they're getting smaller. Does that make sense? Just because I'm like,
Mm.
"Wait, but how am I gonna make it? Like how am I gonna do that if I don't have the money?" You know? So, and I'm sure you've probably like gone through that as well. Because you shared some of that in the presentation that you did for us. So I kind of wanted to touch base on how you overcame like that fear. I know it's easier like said than done, but like what are some advice that you would give me?
Well, I'm curious when it comes to this fear. I'm
Hmm.
curious. I have a couple questions. So the
Yeah.
first is what is the fear? Does it come in the form of a thought or a gut feeling, or how is that showing up for you?
I feel like the fear for me, just growing up in a low income household, I feel like for me, it's like, am I going to be able to afford living there? And then also like being a full time student, like getting my master's degree, you know? So I feel like the fear is more so, how am I going to do it? You know?
Mm.
I think that, and money is obviously the fear, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like these are your fears, or do you feel like people have, let's say, shared various thoughts or feelings with you, and then you kind of took it on as your own? What feels like the truth?
Um, I feel like I got that more so because of my older sibling. Not that he like makes my dreams shorter, but I feel like, so before going to UCSB, you know, I'm from Modesto, California, which is a super small town in the Central Valley. And so when I first told like my family, I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I want to go to UCSB, like I got accepted, like I'm gonna go there," you know? Like it was my dream school to attend here. And so I remember like he would be like, "Oh, but how, like you're not gonna be able to make it because like, well, you're not working right now, and then you're probably not gonna be working over there, and then what if they don't give you enough FAFSA?" Like I feel like it's more of outside people, and I don't think they do it with like a bad intent. I think it's just because in my family we're not used to that, you know, like we're
Yeah.
not used to somebody making something out of nothing. And so I feel like that's honestly what has created my fear, because if it wasn't for like those little comments, I probably wouldn't have them in my mind right now, you know?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's important to understand maybe where the root of a thought came from, especially if you identify as being a little bit of a dreamer and
Yeah.
idealistic. I know I certainly identify as, yeah, like let's make dreams happen. And
Yeah.
the people that have a chance at their dreams happening and sustaining it are the people that believe that it's possible in the first place. I'll share for my personal experience. I always wanted to live in San Francisco. Similarly, I grew up about an hour away, and I had this belief that, okay, well, before I move to San Francisco, I need to have a full-time job in technology. And
Yeah.
at that time, I was working at a natural snack food startup. It started out as part-time, then it became full-time. And
Mhm.
then I told myself, okay, I need to have the job for 6 months. And so I waited until I was in that tech job full time for 6 months. And then I moved, and then I was laid off in about 4 months. So, and then, I mean, by that same logic, then I should have left, right? I should have been like,
Mhm.
oh, I no longer have that tech job
Yeah.
to support the
Mhm.
lifestyle here. But there are moments like this that can happen where they make you realize, wait a second, I actually could have moved here before the tech job and everything, because look at me now, I'm here without the tech job. And
Yeah.
I ended up living in that city for another 5 years after that
Mhm.
layoff. And I decided that, okay, this is going to work no matter what's realistic.
Yeah.
And things end up working out for you when you operate not from fear, like, oh my gosh, what's the worst case scenario? We have so many people in our lives and even ourselves that can live in fear and like, oh, what's going to happen? Or, and I'm also a first generation college student. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know what that can be like to just have, slightly different,
Mhm.
a different trajectory, or different, even at times different values, right? From your family, where it's an opportunity to journal, get really clear for yourself how you feel, and
Mhm.
ask yourself more times than not, what's the best case scenario? And to have that top of mind. And I should also mention, the same week that I lost my job in San Francisco in the tech field, then I also I also lost the apartment that I was living in. There
Oh
was an
my.
apartment, so I had to move out. And then what do you know? I was talking about, okay, I need another place to live. And it would have been easy, right? I could have been like, it's a sign. I should just move back in with my parents or, whatever it is. But I was like, no, I'm here. This has been the dream and this is where I'm meant to be. And then there was an opening in a place where I ended up living for 5 years. And the housing market in San Francisco, similarly to LA, very competitive.
Mhm.
And I had been doing a combination of networking, but also going to house parties and meeting people. And it was a result of those connections, those friend connections, that allowed me to plug in to a space where the timing aligned and they needed someone to move in within the same week that I needed a place. And it got to be easy. And actually, the rent, because money is a concern, right? When you don't have a job at the moment, it
Yeah.
was more than what I was paying before. So I was really like, okay, well, here we go. And then guess what? It turned out that it was a house and there
Uh-huh.
was an opportunity to one room that no one was using to turn it into another bedroom. And then my rent went down and everyone else's in the place went down as well, of course. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of those things where you can't always plan every single step,
Uh-huh.
but it's like you take the first step. And especially in a city like, many people dream of living in New York, maybe
Yeah.
living in San Francisco, living in Los Angeles. And you're going to encounter people that live in their smaller town and
Mhm.
they say, oh, well, why would you live there when you could just be here and save money? Sometimes it's not about saving money. Sometimes it's about the opportunity to actually make more money where there's more wealth in these cities
Mhm.
and the quality of life. And you'll be surrounded by other people who also are making it work
Yeah.
and or thriving in a city that other people may want to live in, but maybe they never get past those fears
Yeah.
and never make it work. So, or maybe they tell themselves, well, actually, even though I've always dreamed of living in LA, at least, well, this city is only an hour away. But it's like, no, don't start that dream if you want to be in the city. And I will say, yeah, the difference between living an hour away from San Francisco and being in San Francisco was a lot different. I am so glad that I had that experience
Mhm.
and it opened so many professional doors. And especially if you're interested in plugging in and meeting new people and adding a lot of value, to the social and professional spaces that you're in, when you live in the city where it's happening, so I mean, I would even go a step further and wherever you want to be in LA, if there's a neighborhood that is kind of like, oh, that would be amazing. That would be awesome. Get in there if you can or get
Mhm.
close to it. And then wherever you are, it becomes your norm.
Mhm.
And I'd say looking for opportunities to make more money versus save more money and
Mhm.
making wise investments.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously crypto is a conversation right now. That's a little volatile, but hey, like it's working out for people. There's also it's called Ellevest.
Mhm.
It's this woman-owned investment app where you can put in even a small amount every month, and you have the option of selecting high risk, which I'd recommend, especially, being on the younger side, like high risk, because with great risk can come great reward. And you can also select all women-owned businesses if you want.
And you said it was an app, like
Yeah,
on
Ellevest.
no, follow
Yeah,
me. Elvis.
yeah, because especially if you happen to it depends on your financial
Yeah.
situation. If you do find that you have some money in savings or even sitting in your checking account, why not put it in an account like this where if you really need it, you can pull it out, but it's going to be making more money for you sitting in this account than in other accounts.
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, any questions, personal, professional, you're welcome to ask it. Nothing's off limits.
Thank you so much. It feels like a big sister is like talking to me and like giving me all this advice. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's really meaningful. Um, I also kind of wanted to talk about I mean, thank God I haven't felt this way yet. But I have seen, like, I know like my friends that have felt this, like imposter syndrome. And then I've also seen like I'm like on TikTok a lot. So I've seen like a lot of videos where like these girls specifically, I don't know, it's because I'm talking a lot about getting my master's degree, but like my For You page on TikTok is all about like the master programs. And they talk a lot about like imposter syndrome. So have you ever felt that? And if so, like how do you deal with that?
Hmm. Let's see. I certainly have felt it in certain spaces
Yeah.
because throughout your life, throughout your career, there are certain spaces that maybe in one context,
Yeah.
they would say no to you
Mhm.
being in the room, but in another, they could say yes. So an example of that would be, certain major tech companies
Mhm.
that maybe they weren't directly hiring me,
Mhm.
like when I was first starting out in my career. But then all of a sudden, I'm being invited to give, a lunch and learn presentation to their to people that work there. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And same thing with, various Ivy League colleges, maybe
Mhm.
not actually attending
Yeah.
an Ivy League college, but then being invited to give a talk to
Mhm.
the students at the Ivy League college. There's an opportunity in those situations to have imposter syndrome because you're like, wait a second. But then even if, let's say, these spaces, if you were welcomed into them immediately, let's
Mhm.
say in one context or even both, imposter syndrome can arise from questioning if you feel like you're meant to be there.
Yeah.
And there's new research that's come out around imposter syndrome isn't so much about, let's say, most likely the woman, but men too, experiencing, oh, like maybe I shouldn't be here. It's not so much about making yourself more confident. It can
Yeah.
actually be a reflection of the reality of simply you haven't seen a lot of people like yourself or whatever in the space, or maybe there are microaggressions, that are kind of subtle put downs. So I think it's also important to, when we have this conversation around imposter syndrome, to also take back your power and be like, wait, do you actually feel like you're an imposter?
Mhm.
Or are you kind of feeling like potentially other people are not as accepting? And then the best thing you can do is have that authentic confidence within yourself. Sometimes it's from ignorance. Sometimes you don't know that, you stereotypically wouldn't belong in a room and you're in there and you're like, oh, I feel fine,
Yeah.
and, and other times, um, it could feel like more of a stretch, but
Mhm.
then over time, when you're in those rooms more and more, then
Mhm.
it feels like less of a stretch and it just becomes normal. There's a lot of talk about put yourself in rooms where, and as early your career, I think it's certainly, yeah, you can find rooms where people are more established than you because you're
Yeah.
brand new to the game. So just getting in almost any room when you're very early career is going to be beneficial. And then you get to be more discerning and also rise in your leadership as time goes on. And especially, if someone is identifying as like, I have imposter syndrome, be mindful of your language. And
Mhm.
maybe instead of like, I have it, I'm experiencing it right now, kind of adding language to distance yourself from it, where it doesn't become like, okay, give me 5 words that describe yourself. Imposter syndrome. No, like we don't need that in the mix. Uh, so yeah, I mean, it's that fine balance of being mindful of how these terms are impacting you while
Yeah.
also consciously choosing, actually, I want to show up this way instead, and
Mhm.
taking actions that support that.
Mhm. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And then this is more like a personal question. I know you shared the story with my class. And basically it's more like on a personal level. How do you know like when to let go certain people that are just like constantly like bringing you down, whether that be like friends or family? Because I know, or at least for me, I feel like I have a really big heart, and I tend to like just forgive and forget basically. um,
Mm.
and so how do you deal with that?
Yeah. And, I think, first of all, to have a big heart and to see the best in people is such a gift.
Yeah.
And setting healthy boundaries is something that can come naturally to some people, or maybe in certain circumstances. But society, especially when it comes to family, that can be quite tricky, where there are a lot of people that accept unhealthy family dynamics. And there are a lot of people who, let's say, spend a lot of time with their family and just kind of check out emotionally, because it's not totally socially acceptable to have boundaries.
Yeah.
And not everyone needs to spend a lot of time apart. Some people do, to recalibrate their identity and what they stand for. In my own journey, when it comes to friends and family, I tend to be pretty transparent. And, I kind of say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Are you interested in working this out? And, in a friendship that's worth keeping, then I completely advocate for everyone caring how everyone feels and having open and transparent communication. And then same thing with family, actually. However, I think with certain family dynamics, they can be really ingrained. They can be intergenerational, where maybe that's the way that, their dad or their mom treated them, and it's a cycle. And I know for me, one of the defining moments was around wanting to talk about it and reach common ground, and being met with like, can you just get over it?
Yeah.
And like, no, and let's not discuss this as in the past. And that is a form of invalidation of emotion, because there are certain forms of grief that we go through when let's say we feel like the odd one out in our families, or oftentimes that very experience is invalidated by the family members, because they're like, no, you're a part of the family, you're included. But then you can look back and be like, hold on, like there are actually a lot of experiences that where I didn't feel that way. And actually, yeah, there were certain things that happened that are not in alignment with being a part of and really welcomed into this group. So I know for myself, making an effort to connect and not just talk about, hey, some stuff that happened, but also what does the future look like? And not everyone is that intentional. Not everyone has a vision for their life or wants to be that thoughtful. And that can be hard to believe. If you are a big-hearted, thoughtful person, you're like, wait a sec. Like, if we can live our lives whatever we want, why do some people decide to not do that? And why do people settle? But it happened. When it comes to setting healthy boundaries, to not make definitive statements like, I'm never coming back, or you know what I mean? But to be very transparent and say, hey, I've been feeling this way. So the decision I'm making is to, if you want to say, oh, I'll call you however many times a month or a year or whatever. Or if you simply want space, then you don't need to ask permission. And you're not always going to get someone's blessing. It really depends on the attachment style of the people that you're speaking with. You could be met with, oh no, like, let's try to work it out. Now I want to work it out right now. Or you could be met with, okay, bye. That's literally the embodiment of anxious and then avoidant attachment. and there's a lot in between. But yeah, and you don't need to say, okay, give me 1 week and then I'll get back to you. You can keep it open-ended. You can say, hey, I'm going to take space because I haven't really been feeling met in this relationship dynamic. And I feel like I've been really trying, I've done X, Y, and Z, and it doesn't feel good. So, and then you can say, like, I'll reach back out when I feel like it's healthy to do so, but I'm going to be embarking upon these dreams. And it's really important to me that I have a support network that feels supportive right now. And then, there are people that go through periods of months, could be years, it could be longer term. And to have that fluidity with yourself, and also if you set a boundary, to stay true to that boundary. And some people may know right away, okay, this relationship needs to have a break assigned to it. And then other times, maybe you spend a little less time and see how it feels. And there are emotions that come up, right? There could be guilt because society at large, this quote of like, well, it's your family, like they've done so much for you. Like maybe you owe them in so many ways. And ultimately, if we're giving from a place of guilt versus a place of love, that's really not serving to do anything but perpetuate unhealthy dynamics.
Mhm.
So it sounds like there's an opportunity to be reflective. It's worth considering mixing up the people that we dedicate our time to, and it becomes less about pushing people away and more about inviting other people closer.
Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I also, sorry, I like have so many things to
Yeah, yeah.
talk about. I also kind of wanted to it's the same like focus basically, but a little more towards like goals and dreams again. Basically, like how do you like deal with or overcome with like failures in life?
Mm,
Because I feel like, or rejection for example, because I feel like me, like as a college student, it's it's difficult, you know, like yeah, like I got accepted to my colleges, you know, but I mean, after this, it's like even more competitive, you know, and it's like serious, you know, because it has to do with my career. And so I just wanted to know, like, how did you like overcome failure, and how did you not let it affect like your confidence? Because I feel like that's something really big too. Because I feel like, yeah, like I would say I'm pretty like confident in things, but when I get rejected, it's like, oh wait, like maybe I'm not good enough, you know? Like
mm.
it can, I feel like a lot of the times it kind of steps back. Or when I, for example, like when I get a bad grade, I'm like, oh wait, like I thought I did so good on this. Like I don't know. I feel like it just starts messing up with like my confidence basically.
One of the keys to being resilient from failure is to not necessarily expect that it's going to happen, but to know that it's a part of the game of ambition. Like you're going to fail more than most people, and you're going to succeed more than most people if you're going after what you really want. Sarah Blakely, I think, is a great example of this, you know, founder of Spanx,
Yeah.
who was like failing all over the place. And then she got one great idea and really pushed forward with it, and
Mm-hmm.
self-made billionaire, success,
Yeah.
and you know, with a beautiful family and success, you know, in multiple aspects, right? I think if you're trying to avoid pain, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So, for example, when I fail at something, or if I'm rejected personally or professionally, it's not like when the rejection happens, I immediately say, oh, like pump up my chest and like, well, they're missing out because I'm amazing. Bye. Like, because anyone can tell that's not really grounded.
Yeah.
That's kind of compensating and invulnerable, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, yeah, certainly there have been times where I've, let's say, been rejected, and I actually do think, oh, it's more calm though. I'm like, oh, they're missing out. They don't understand my value. And then you know, I don't tell them that. It doesn't matter. I just
Mm-hmm.
know that. And then in those cases, it doesn't really impact me.
Mm-hmm.
However, there are other times where, let's say there's a rejection and maybe it touches on a pattern
Yeah.
personally or professionally, and maybe you make it mean something about you. And you're like, oh my gosh, see, this thing is true. This limiting belief is actually true because look, it happened again. And that's a time when not necessarily allowing yourself to totally spiral, but to
Mm-hmm.
be with the emotion and to not try to stifle it or turn it into something else.
Yeah.
Because, you know, sometimes when things happen in our lives, we're not going to react how other people would expect us to, just like maybe it doesn't affect you. And
Yeah.
it rolls right off when someone else is like, wow, like I would have broke down crying. But maybe for you, that just wasn't your truth. And that's fine. But then there could be another time where someone else is like, oh, interesting. Like that wouldn't have impacted me in the way it impacted you.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you're having a real visceral emotional response. So to be with it and to honor it. And I know narrative therapy, you know, journaling, writing down what happened if there is a trigger and it feels really deep,
Mm-hmm.
and getting curious about it. And then if you were to rewrite the story, you know, how would you like it to go next time? Like, especially, I think oftentimes true regret comes from acting in a way that is not in accordance with your values.
Mm-hmm.
So being very clear on what your values are and knowing that sometimes when you're in complete compliance with your values, it will cause failure,
Yeah.
but not failure in like, it's not the ultimate failure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not being aligned with certain things, because you will not align with everything when you know what you stand for. It's
Yeah.
polarizing. So you can expect, kind of like a magnet, to repel some things and attract others. And sometimes people think, oh, this is what I want. And then they're like, oh, actually, no. or vice versa. Being
Yeah.
able to, if someone seems like, oh, they're not your people or whatever, and they're acting, standoffish or whatever, just don't take it to heart too much and be like, okay, and then they could all of a sudden get to know what you stand for more and be like, wow, I'm in love with your work or whatever it is.
Yeah. Thank you. And then just the last question. So how do you I feel like I deal with this a lot with like procrastination and kind of getting sidetracked because I feel like I have all of these like ideas and all of these goals that I want to do, but I feel like I mean for the most part I do like do them, but there's a lot of them that like I don't like I just talk about them, but I never get started, you know?
Mm.
Like, oh, that would be so cool to do, but I don't do them. So how do you deal with that?
Okay.
Or like
So first of all, I would stop talking about some of the bigger goals.
Mhm.
So, and this can seem counterintuitive because it's like, wait a second. Of course, I want to ideate and talk about all these goals. Like, let's say you want to write a book, and then you're talking with all these people about, oh, yeah, one day I'm going to write a book. And then you know what happens? Then everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. That's so great. Okay, what's it going to be called? And you're like, oh, I think it's going to be about this. And then you're getting all this external validation, and you haven't even done the thing yet. So, the real work, it's like, what would you rather do? Have the experience of positive affirmations from people when you talk about the work, or the experience of being in flow state and maybe having those uncomfortable moments of sitting down and creating in a way that stretches you that you haven't done before.
Mhm.
So that's one thing, to be a little bit more private with some of your goals, especially ones that feel really audacious
Yeah.
that you haven't done before. And maybe what you want to do is just write out a list of all your goals. You want to write out a list of like the top 10, 20, 100 goals in your life. I mean, why not just go there? And then narrow it down to the top 5. And I'd like to say for your life, because why focus on just this year?
Yeah.
Because here's what you're able to do. You're able to front load your success. So for example, going back to the book example, I've
Mhm.
known since I was very young that, oh yeah, I want to be an author. I didn't
Mhm.
know if I would actually do it, but I knew that I wanted to do it. And
Yeah.
then there came a time in 2019 when there was a pocket of time when I had the opportunity to do it. And it was almost like, but wait, but it's too soon. I didn't know I was going to be a young author. You know what I mean? There are all these thoughts that come up like, hold on, like, I don't need to do that yet. But
Mhm.
then it's like, hold on, if I'm looking at not just like goals for the year, goals for your life, making that list of, the 10, 20, 100, whatever it is, and then go to your top 5. And then out of the top 5, choose that, put them in order,
Mhm.
1 through 5. And then let's say that 1 is around, getting an advanced degree. And then 1 is about, being a playwright. And let's say
Mhm.
that you're in school right now. Then even if you'd rather be a playwright than having this advanced degree, maybe it's like, okay, it's in my top 5. You focus on that goal because now is the time for that
Mhm.
goal.
Mhm.
And not to say that you can't work on 2 at once,
Yeah.
but to really, this is how people accomplish big things. They
Mhm.
have audacious goals, and that they're taking action towards it pretty much every day.
Um,
So, yeah, I mean, can you think of one of your top goals right now?
One of my top goals right now
Or for your
is
life?
what happened?
Or for your life?
Oh yeah. One
Yeah.
of my top goals right now is actually to start like a peer mentor program.
Mm.
Um, at this, it's called, well, I was in Trio Upward program, and since I was a freshman in high school, and so I really want to start that up to write it down like on my, well, first of all, to give back, but also to write it down like on my resume when I apply for my master's program. So that's like one of my top goals, like that I plan on doing like within the next months.
Nice.
Yeah, thank
Okay. So, I mean, that's a very clear goal to have this mentorship program. So it's a matter of, okay, here's the goal. And do you
Mhm.
feel like you can have that program up and running in 1 year, 2 years,
Yeah.
6 months? And
Mhm.
then you go backwards to where you are now.
Mhm.
And okay, what are the milestones? Oh, I guess one of the milestones would be identifying the name
Mhm.
and the logo. Or, maybe one of the milestones is getting your mentor group. And then
Mhm.
another milestone is having the application set up
Yeah.
and actively sending it out to potential mentees. And you know what I mean? Having oftentimes what keeps people from achieving their goals is having it be really abstract. So if you're able to systematize, and these days with ChatGPT, you could type in your goal and see what it comes up with. And of
Yeah.
course, this is in alignment with your goal itself. Mentorship and coaching can also be helpful
Yeah.
with that extra boost and the extra touch when it comes to planning everything out and having the accountability. If you feel like that's needed, to achieve those benchmarks in time. So yeah, and saying something like that out loud is really powerful, especially when you're already taking proactive steps, because it's community. It requires people other than yourself.
Mhm.
Maybe it's something where, there could be, I don't know, like maybe there's a sponsor out there who has a product like
Yeah.
a personal development journal, and they learn about your business.
Mhm.
They're like, oh, how many mentees do you have? I'd love to donate this to them. Or you know what I mean? When you
Yeah.
create something, then other people who've created things have the opportunity, you can collaborate
Mhm.
and help one another further your missions.
Yeah.
So yeah, how does that sound in terms of, not necessarily talking about it
Mhm.
until it's already in momentum?
Yeah.
And so then you're talking about it not like, oh, I have this idea and I'm
Mhm.
waiting for someone to like catalyze the idea. It's like, oh no, like I have the intake form for mentees. I have the intake form on Google Forms
Mhm.
for for people who are mentors and mentees,
Yeah.
and I'm ready for people to apply for both.
Mhm. Yeah.
Maybe you want to start with your team of mentors, I would say, and then kind of go from there. And you can start small. You can be like, there's a team of 6 of us total, including myself, and
Mhm.
we're ready to mentor. We each have capacity to mentor 2 people,
Mhm.
2025. And, like just kind of learn a lot with a smaller number, and then you can decide to scale. Um, but yeah, how does that sound? Just
That
kind of,
sounds great. No, yeah, I'm definitely writing everything down in my mind.
and it's recorded. So,
Yes, yes, yeah, that's why
yeah,
first I was gonna, like, start taking notes, but yeah, it's recorded, so yeah. Thank you so much.
awesome.
I really appreciate that. Like I said, it's very I'm very grateful that, you gave me this time and you advised me in some of the things that I struggle with, so I really appreciate that.
You're very welcome, Valerie. And thank you for reaching out after,
Mhm.
I gave that talk. And yeah, I mean, I see a young professional, like 1 more year, you're in the professional landscape. I mean, you could even join now once you start like nonprofit mentorship program, whatever it is. And it's like you're ready to go down your own path. And there's uncertainty and there's glimpses of a vision. There
Mhm.
are little glimpses and glimmers of, ooh, I like that. I want to go in that direction. And I think it's really a matter of devoting as much time and energy as possible to the
Mhm.
places, things, people that are inspiring you to grow
Yeah.
in ways that feel in alignment with your soul.
Mhm.
So, you're on that path. So I appreciate your thoughtful questions today. And I'm so excited to see where you are headed, you
Thank
know?
I really appreciate that. Thank you.